Hey, how are you? My name is Luke Stokes, and this is going to be the audio recording of the Barcamp Nashville 2013 presentation I did on Will Bitcoin be more disruptive than the internet? A bunch of my friends weren't able to make it, and they've been bugging me about the slides and all that, so I thought I'd go ahead and record some audio to go along with those slides. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Bitcoin, more disruptive than the internet? You can reach me at Luke Stokes on Twitter, or use the hashtag BCN13Bitcoin if you want to talk about this presentation online. This is how I opened the presentation at Barcamp Nashville. My friend Tara tweeted this out a few days before the Barcamp, and I basically speaks for itself. I kind of was like, well, okay, I'm done now. Any questions? Of course, Bitcoin is more than just the price. This presentation is going to do a brief history of money, very brief, really high-level overview of Bitcoin and the fundamentals behind why I'm excited about Bitcoin. What's the problem that I believe Bitcoin can be very disruptive regarding? And then we'll connect the dots a little bit. I'll tell you a little bit about my story as far as how I got into Bitcoin. And then we also had time for Q&A at Barcamp, which obviously will be a little more difficult with the recording. So here's a ridiculously brief history of money. Centralization of money started in the late 1700s, the modern centralization of money with the Bank of London. There was also the first Bank of the United States, the second Bank of the United States, and in between there, our own Andrew Jackson here in Tennessee fought very adamantly against central banking. He called them a den of vipers. He realized that the challenges that central banking can create for any kind of citizen population. So there was a period of time where we didn't have a central bank because he killed the bank. Then in 1917, with the Federal Reserve Act, which created the Federal Reserve central bank system that we have today, and coincidentally, that was also the same year that the income tax, federal income tax, became a requirement. Not really actually a coincidence. Then, many people don't know this, I didn't myself when I first started looking at all this stuff, in 1933, FDR dropped the gold standard. He made it illegal to own gold. Basically, they confiscated the gold. They bought it at a certain rate, about 20-something an ounce, and then they were able to sell it back at around 30 or 40 an ounce, so they made a nice little bit of money on that. 1944, after World War II, Bretton Woods Agreement got all the different nations of the world to come together, and they tied their different international currencies to the US dollar, which was then tied to gold. And that system kind of was how they were to rebuild the world and provide some stability to the financial markets. And then in 1971, what is, if you look on Wikipedia, known as the Nixon shock, Nixon, air quotes, temporarily got rid of the convertibility of the US dollar to gold. At this moment, prior to this moment, you could exchange your US dollars for gold. At this moment, that string had been cut. There was no exchangeability. The US dollar officially became a fiat currency. So what is fiat? Well, basically, it's whatever the government says it is. It's money, legal tender that the government says has value. It's not tied to any intrinsic value. It doesn't have any backing in any kind of commodity, and it's not convertible to anything. So is it really a bad thing? Well, depends on who you believe. There was a study done of 775 historical fiat currencies, and most of them failed. In fact, the average lifespan was only 27 years. So if you think back to the Nixon shock in 1971, we're a little bit beyond our 27-year average lifespan. That should give all of us some pause, I would think. And some may say, well, the mighty US dollar, there's no way that could fall. The petrodollar, it's going to last forever. It's the world reserve currency, meaning countries store dollars via treasury bonds in their vaults and on their balance sheets, and so therefore there's a vested interest to keep the US dollar up. Well, as this chart shows, that's not necessarily the case. Historical world reserve currencies historically have changed from nation to nation. We're not the only nation to ever have a world reserve currency. Granted, it's the largest, most connected world we've ever had, which plays a major role in that currency status. But if you've been listening to the news lately and the rhetoric coming out of China and other BRIC nations, they're not very excited about how we've been abusing the privilege we have of this world reserve currency status. So again, if history says it could change, I think it could change again. So where does Bitcoin come in? Well, we'll get there. But first I want to cover some important quotes. After all, I'm trying to make a really big argument that you'll want to tell your grandkids you knew about life before Bitcoin. I want to describe the problem that I believe Bitcoin is going to be disrupting. And it's a pretty major thing. It's something that I believe throughout history, there's never been this opportunity for individuals to control their own store of value, for individuals to control their own wealth. And I also believe there's a fundamental problem, major problem, epic proportions problem with how we're doing central banking today. And so to kind of drive that home, we're going to cover some quotes from some famous people I'm sure you've heard of. One of the kind of founders of this central banking system, one of the Rothschilds, says, "Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws. It is well that the people of the nation do not understand our banking or monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." Henry Ford. Interesting thing about Henry Ford is when he was building his car empire, he needed money, and the banks were trying to squeeze him out of it. History records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance. "You are a den of vipers and thieves. I have determined to rout you out. And by the eternal," and this is where he slams his hand down on the desk, "I will rout you out." Very famous speech by Andrew Jackson. "Whoever controls the volume of money in any country is absolute master of all industry and commerce." I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. The issuing power of money should be taken away from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. This is an important quote. We spend our entire lives working to build wealth, to build retirement funds, to support our families. Most of us don't even understand what money is. We don't understand what that paycheck contains. We don't understand the systems in place that control that paycheck, control the value, the purchasing power of that money. As I was doing this research, I also thought about, and based on my worldview, this was important to me, but even Jesus Christ, we're talking thousands of years ago, the only recorded time in the Bible that he was physically violent is when he was overthrowing the tables of the money changers. What had happened is in that time period, those in power in the Jewish community had cornered the market of the Jewish shekel. And the way they had their system in place, the people that would have to come every year to sacrifice, make sacrifices, they'd have to come and buy doves and animals for those sacrifices. They come from all over the world, and they would come, and they weren't allowed to use their coins, which they had brought from their local country, their local currency, because they had pagan gods on them. They said, "Oh, those coins are unclean. We can't accept those coins." But you can exchange them for the Jewish shekel. And because they had cornered the market, they controlled the liquidity of the Jewish shekel. And this is what made Jesus pretty angry, because he knew the connection between being able to control the money supply and being able to enslave people. If you control the money supply, you control the people. If you control the credit, you can control the money supply. If you control the risk, you can control the credit. And the reason for that is that today, all money is debt. All the money that we have in the system, when the Treasury needs money, the government needs money, they actually borrow that money from the Federal Reserve System. Some call it a gigantic Ponzi scheme of epic proportions. If you borrow the first dollar into existence and it comes with interest, how do you pay that off? Well, then you have to borrow a second dollar to pay off the interest from the first dollar. Well, if you borrow that second dollar, which also comes with interest, how do you pay that off? You get the idea. In 2008, the ratings agencies were claiming that subprime mortgages were a great investment. They controlled the risk, which means they controlled the credit, and so on and so forth. Third-party risk. That's one of the most critical aspects of understanding the system we have today and the major vulnerabilities. When you write a check, you're trusting that your bank is going to honor that check, or the receiving bank. When you spend a dollar bill, you're trusting that the government's not going to hyperinflate that dollar bill. And you look in countries like Argentina and other places in Greece, like that wasn't the case. And when you swipe that card, you're trusting the credit card company to be legitimate and for that transaction to go through for you. You have to trust these outside systems. And as we saw this year in Cyprus, when they had major, potential major bank failures, they all got a haircut. Deposits over a certain amount, Cyprus just came in and took them. Because most people don't know this, when you deposit money in a bank, if you read real closely the little, fine text, it says the bank owns those deposits. That's why they're able to go and invest them however they want. It's their money. All they give you is a little piece of paper that says, hey, I owe you this money. It's sitting in this account. Well, it's not actually sitting there. They've lent it out. That's how they make money. That's how they can pay out interest. And there's also some really scary current plans to say, well, that whole bailout thing didn't go very well with the Occupy Wall Street and we are the 99% and all that stuff. So let's not do that again. How about we do something called a bail-in? And you should really do your own research on that. It's a scary concept. Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, these people are working with Federal Reserve and other systems to basically convert you to being a shareholder if the bank begins to fail. These too big to fail banks. So instead of you getting your money, you'll get shares in a failed bank. And you think, whoa, wait a minute, FDIC is supposed to protect me up to a certain amount. Well, there's not enough money in the FDIC reserves to handle major collapses. And that's why these banks are considered too big to fail. Some scary stuff. So let's finally get into what is Bitcoin. We've laid down a framework for why the current system is a little bit shaky and has a lot of third-party risk. Well, Bitcoin is the first decentralized digital currency, and I'll make these slides available so you can go ahead and click through these and watch. There's a great video on We Use Coins, just a couple minutes long, and it does an excellent job of explaining what Bitcoin is. Also, the Wikipedia page is actually fantastic. They keep it updated pretty well, and it's got a lot of really good information on what Bitcoin is. The concept behind Bitcoin is it uses cryptography. It's a cryptocurrency. So the trust in the system is based on math. It's not based on any government decree or anything else. There's no third-party risk. It's like digital gold, programmable money. It uses cryptography to prevent double spending, which has been historically a challenge for digital currencies. Because if I spend money to one person, there has to be a system in place to ensure I don't go and spend it to another person. And that system ideally has to be decentralized, or else somebody, if they can control the centralization, they can control the currency. Once that transaction is validated, every transaction is pseudo-anonymously recorded in the public ledger, which is called the blockchain. And what that means is there's no chargebacks, there's no fraud. Once a transaction happens, it's locked in and every single node on the network gets to see it and says, yes, that's what happened. The amount used to be here and now it's over here. It's completely visible so that it can't be manipulated. The way you own Bitcoin is via the Bitcoin address. Bitcoin address comes in two parts. You have the public address and the private key that controls that public address. This is, for example, is one of my Bitcoin addresses. If you were to send money using an app on your phone to scan that QR code, or if you were to copy and paste that address in, you would then be transferring Bitcoin to me. Mainly because I have the private key to control that address. When I control that address, I can then go and buy stuff with that Bitcoin, or I can transfer it to anyone else. It's also, a lot of people get confused. They think, oh, you have to own an entire Bitcoin. And oh man, like today they were up over around $300 a coin. People think, wow, I can't afford a whole coin. Well, most people don't buy an entire bar of gold either. Bitcoin is divisible actually into 100 million divisions per coin. They call them Satoshis. So you can buy a very tiny fraction of a Bitcoin. Also means you can do micropayments, which is really incredible. I mean, there's some amazing ideas that people are thinking about when they have a system for micropayments that they've just never considered before. I heard one person talking about the idea of self-driving cars, automated cars that are driving along on a highway and constantly communicating to each other via micropayments to say, hey, I'm in a big hurry. Can I pay you in fractions of a cent to like pull off to the right and go a little slower so I can pass you? You know, just amazing ideas. You can automate and program the transfer of value and money because micropayments are an option because the fees are basically non-existent. Here's an example of an address at blockchain.info. This is an interesting address because this is actually all of the Bitcoin that the FBI seized from the Dread Pirate Roberts, who was the guy who was running an illegal website called the Silk Road. The Silk Road was selling illegal products like drugs, and Ross Ulbricht, who goes by the name the Dread Pirate Roberts, got busted. And there's a lot of speculation. Probably later after this video someone will know the real story, but the understanding at this point is that it's possible he had an old wallet that previously wasn't encrypted, and so they were able to hack his computer and get access to his private keys and transfer all his money out, which again brings up an important point. If you're storing Bitcoin, you really should do it offline, meaning you print out your private key and stick it in a safe, or you put it on, burn it to a CD, encrypt it, or put it on a USB stick. There's any number of ways you can do it. Put it in a Dropbox file encrypted, but you shouldn't have it online because that way it can't be hacked if it's offline. So let's drive this home a little bit with an example. When I write you a check, I go ahead and hand you that piece of paper that has my signature on it. That piece of paper then has to be cleared through a central clearinghouse. It has to go through some form of centralization. That central clearinghouse has to check my bank account, make sure the money's there, has to check your bank account, make sure it's a valid account, and then it has to debit my account, credit your account, and there's that centralization. And if that system fails, there's a lot of trouble. There's a lot of risk. Additionally, that system takes a long time. It could take days to do a wire transfer. We at FoxyCart have a team of guys all over the world and the country, and paying them is a pain. It takes a long time. And you're sending money overseas or nonprofit contributions. It's the current system takes a long time and requires centralization. With Bitcoin, there's no central authority. It's a completely open source protocol. The blockchain public ledger I talked about ensures that there's complete visibility. The way that the Bitcoin transactions are added to the public ledger, the way they're validated, is through this proof of work algorithm, also known as mining. So when I send a transaction to someone else, I send them some Bitcoin, that new transaction gets added to the blockchain about every 10 minutes. So what that means is they run this really hard math algorithm and they figure out somewhere in the world someone gets the answer that they're looking for. What it is it's a hash algorithm that runs, and if you're familiar with hash algorithms, when you put in an input, the output is completely random. And you change one character in a large amount of input and it completely changes the output. There's no way to kind of predict what that output's going to be. So the process of mining says you take the entire blockchain, basically the agreed upon history that everyone has, plus all the new transactions that have just happened, plus a nonce, which is a random character, and you run that through this difficult algorithm. And the output has to have a certain number of zeros on the end, which is, again, impossible to control or manipulate. And based on the number of zeros, that's how they control what's called the difficulty. And the algorithm is designed so that every 10 minutes, someone solves that problem. That proof of work happens. Somewhere in the world, someone says, hey, I got the answer. It has the correct number of zeros. And everyone looks at it and says, yep, you got the answer. Then they add that to the blockchain and then move on to the next batch of unconfirmed transactions. And that's how the process works. As a reward for whoever found that, they get what's called the blockchain reward. They get new coins added to the money supply. But again, it's completely public, completely understood via the protocol. It's not like the Federal Reserve today, which is printing $85 billion a month. Instead, it's every 10 minutes, currently 25 coins get added to the system. And that blockchain reward gets halved every 4 years. So it started as 50, it's now 25. By the year 2016, I think it is, it'll get halved again. There's currently 11 million coins in existence. By the year 2140, it'll be 21 million, and there won't be any more coins than that. So the money supply is controlled and visible, and you can plan against it. Whereas today, we have no idea if we're going to hit hyperinflation, if we're going to hit deflation. The US dollar, it's scary. So it's incredible from a technology standpoint. That to me is what's most exciting about. The current price is not as interesting as what it can actually do. You have a controlled, predictable money supply. There aren't double spends. The entire protocol is completely open source. From a security standpoint, it's just incredible. There have been some really amazing professional security people that have looked at it and said it's alien technology. It's just amazing how well it was done, because they understood if there was any kind of major flaw in the system, the entire platform would fall apart. So people have really looked into it in great detail. But it's more than just currency. It's also programmable money. When you think about it, credit cards were created before the internet, whereas Bitcoin was built on top of the internet. So in the internet lifespan, credit cards are ancient. And so it's just amazing to me that we're continuing to use an ancient technology. I mean, even the concept of a credit card, even a check, is ridiculous. It's basically, here's the key to my safe. Please only take out as much as you need, or as much as you're supposed to. I mean, you get those you get those numbers, and you can just withdraw whatever. And that's just mind-boggling to me. And we call this a secure system when it's just not. But again, Bitcoin isn't just this transfer of value system. It can also be used for anything in the financial markets that requires centralization. So notary services, stock exchanges, escrow accounts. I mean, what can be done with Bitcoin is just incredible. Felix Salmon, formerly a Portfolio magazine and Euromoney, he's also a blogging editor at Reuters. He said, in many ways, the best and cleanest payment mechanism the world has ever seen when describing Bitcoin. So it has incredible opportunities. So I'll tell a little bit about my story with Bitcoin. I started getting into Bitcoin in February of this year in 2013. If you click through here, you can see a couple of my blog posts that I've done on it. Also links there to a blog post with my company, FoxyCart, which is an e-commerce shopping cart system, which we're fascinated with Bitcoin as an alternate payment method. We support 60 different payment gateways, and Bitcoin is one that we also support via the BitPay payment gateway system. So we have a blog post about that, why we accept Bitcoin, why you can pay for our services in Bitcoin, and why we encourage all of our merchants to get on board with this. And so in this process, I thought, oh, mining, this is amazing. You can run this program on your computer and make free money. Like, awesome. And actually, at the time is when the ASIC miners first came out. They took that really difficult algorithm and they hard-coded it into a chip. So they have these embedded chips that are running ridiculously fast. So I ordered a Bitcoin miner using like my entire stash on March 26th. It was an Avalon Batch 3. It was supposed to arrive in May. And this graph here we're looking at is the difficulty. This is basically if there's a set amount of coins that are going to be released to the entire network. And the way Bitcoin mining works, it's done through pools. So if you get together with a big pool of people and someone within that pool gets the right answer, you get a portion of the reward based on how much of the hashing power, how hard you worked on the algorithm. So even if you didn't get the answer, someone in your group did, you can get a large portion of that reward if you contributed a large portion of the challenge, working on that problem. So as the difficulty goes up, the amount you get decreases because there are more and more people working on this to solve this problem. So if it was supposed to arrive in May, if it had, I probably would have made, I don't know, $20,000 or $30,000 within a matter of months. It actually arrived in August, and as you can see from this graph, my Bitcoin miner had very little chance of being profitable. But what's worse is I melted it. I totally dropped the ball and did something stupid. I thought you only had to plug in one cable. I was familiar with ATX and AT power supplies, and I plugged in the ATX cable. I did not plug in properly the rest of the power cables that powered the different modules. And for some reason, it still booted up and worked. There was a couple little weirdnesses, which I should have been clued in on, but the actual power distribution board didn't isolate power. And so it did actually go ahead and melt that ATX cable and melted the other parts of the cable. So Needless to say, I was extremely discouraged that day because it was my entire investment of Bitcoin to buy this, and it melted out. So I was pretty discouraged. But the cool thing is I was able to part out the pieces to different people who wanted the components. They were very hard to get components because it was just one company in China making them. So I lost quite a bit of money, but when you convert to US dollar at the point I sold my Bitcoin and the point that I sold the parts later, with the rise in price of Bitcoin, I actually kind of broke even as far as US dollar goes, which is kind of interesting. So if you want to get involved in Bitcoin, if you want to buy and sell Bitcoin as of this moment, and it changes all the time, a lot of the exchanges I've used are not around anymore, but I would recommend using Coinbase or Bitstamp, and you can go to howtobuybitcoins.info for the latest information in case that's changed by the time you're watching this. And if you're a merchant, there are some great payment gateway systems out there. Like I mentioned, BitPay already and Coinbase, and then of course FoxyCart. We're a shopping cart system that integrates with BitPay and will integrate with others in the future. And what's nice about going with a platform like ours is if you're not ready to jump into Bitcoin with both feet saying my entire business is going to sell everything and all of our services are going to only accept Bitcoin, we allow you to add Bitcoin as a payment method to your existing systems like credit cards, or even, we support Dwolla and PayPal and Amazon and some other alternate payment methods as well. But that way you can just add it, just as an option as the customer's checking out. If they want to pay with Bitcoin, they can, or they can pay with traditional methods. As far as mining goes, I wouldn't recommend getting into mining personally. Obviously, it has something to do with my personal experience, but also it has to do with this graph again. The difficulty is skyrocketing because people aren't going to spend a lot of money to buy a coin if they can spend that same amount of money, get a miner, and get those coins for essentially free. So enough people are getting involved in this game that I just don't think it's going to be profitable long term. And it isn't really designed to be profitable. Its purpose is to reward those who secure the network enough so they continue to secure the network. If you think about the money invested by PayPal into their infrastructure or any other kind of payment system, it's really important to have that robust infrastructure. And right now, the hashing rate, the number of computers around the world that are working on this problem every single second of the day is immense and incredible. And that's a good thing. That means the more people that get into Bitcoin mining, the more secure the protocol is because there's more people invested in it. But I just don't think it's a profitable endeavor at this point. So in summary, our current system is risky. As you learn about the history of money and the history of the control of the liquidity of money and what that's done to our societies, everything from social unrest to full-on wars being sponsored and supported by banking systems on both sides. It's really sickening, actually. The way money and the control of money is used and the control of debt is used to control humanity is a scary thing. And the more I research it, the more I think we need a solution. And so decentralization and math remove that third-party risk that we currently have with our current financial system. The idea being we do need to control our own money. That is the proper place. We're the ones that go to work every single day working so hard to support our families and to build some money for retirement and potentially build money to give to our kids in the future. I don't want anyone else to be able to steal that from me. I want that store of wealth to have value. And there's a potential. It's not there yet. It's going to take years if it happens at all. But there's a potential for Bitcoin to be that store of value, something that can't be controlled by any central government, can't be controlled by anyone else. It's something that I can take control over the value of my money myself. I do believe the future of money will be digital, decentralized, and programmable, and currently Bitcoin is the leader. Right now, the Federal Reserve is printing $85 billion a month. What's it going to be next month? What's it going to be next year? Nobody knows. History does tell us that eventually, according to what we've seen, fiat currencies don't last. They eventually fail. And if there's a way out of that through gold, silver, Bitcoin, or other means of storing wealth, I think this is stuff we should know about. Hyperinflation, those things happen. And this is a way to hedge against it. So if you do have any questions, please tweet them to me. I'm again at Luke Stokes. You can find me there. You can also check out foxycart.com. If you have any kind of service or product that you're selling, we'd love to be able to help you. And thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it.